Our project is on the brain benefits of bilingualism. Don't raise your children bilingually or problems will result, a phrase often told to parents by well-meaning professionals. The predicted problems were that it could be a burden on the brain, lead to mental confusion, the slowing down of the acquisition of the majority language, identity conflicts, split loyalties, alienation, and some even thought it could lead to schizophrenia. Two main anxieties surrounding the ideas of bilingualism are: 1. The more someone learns and uses a second language, the less skill a person will have in their first language. Rather, like weighing scales or a balance, the more one increases, the more the other decreases. The second is that the ability to speak two languages may be at the cost of efficiency in thinking. The intuitive belief is sometimes that two languages residing inside the thinking quarters will mean less room to store other areas of learning. Luckily, over past years, prejudice and anxiety has decreased. The ownership of two languages does not interfere with efficient thinking, like they've thought. Bilinguals who have two well-developed languages tend to share cognitive advantages. Some of the advantages are focusing on tasks, switching between tasks, more awareness of language or languages, denser gray matter, and communicative sensitivity. One of the benefits believed to have come from being bilingual is being able to focus on tasks better. There was a study done to test inhibitory control ability between bilinguals and monolinguals. They were studying the response time that they were able to give. Those involved in the study, there were 48 people who were bilingual and 51 who were English monolingual. The three different tasks that they had the people in the study complete were the flanker, spatial Stroop, and Simon task. The flanker task had participants presented with rows of arrows and were asked to indicate the direction of the central arrow by pressing a left or right button. They needed to ignore the flanking arrows, which either pointed in the same or different direction as the central arrow. The spatial Stroop task had participants needed to indicate the direction of a single arrow, pointing either left or right by pressing a button. Arrows appeared either on the left or the right side of the screen, which helped or hindered the correct response. Lastly, the Simon task was similar to the spatial Stroop task, but stimuli were single blue or red squares instead of arrows. After finishing this study, it can be seen that bilinguals did not have as many slow response times as the monolinguals did. These results suggest that bilingual speakers have better sustained attention than monolingual speakers, which leads to the understanding that bilinguals are better at focusing on tasks.
Hi class, my name is Corey Lorick. I'm going to go over a little bit about gray matter. So let's start on my first slide titled Gray Matter, and it has a picture of a brain in the top right-hand corner. Basically, gray matter is a mass of neuronal cells that make up about 40% of the brain, and it's mostly found in the outer layer called the cerebral cortex. So it's the outer layer covering of the brain, and it's actually kind of a pinkish hue. It's not actually gray. If you want to learn more about it, check out the link to a video by the Khan Academy that gives a little more in-depth overview of the brain. Why is it important? It's involved in things like memory, speech, muscle control. Greater proportions may account for superior performance in language tasks, and more greater may help delay dementia as we age. It's also involved in executive control of the brain, and it helps send nutrients and energy to other neurons. So it's a very important part of our brain. All right, let's move on to my next slide, which is gray matter and bilingualism benefits. So the two main benefits that studies show are that Spanish English-speaking bilinguals exhibit greater bilateral frontal gray matter. In other words, they have more gray matter in their frontal cortex compared with English-speaking monolinguals. A second benefit is that lifelong bilingualism may result in a different trajectory. In other words, you'll have more gray matter and it will diminish less over time in a region known for its role in semantic processing, semantic retrieval, and naming. And what semantic processing is, it's what occurs after we hear a word, we encode its meaning, then it causes us to relate the word we just heard with other words with similar meanings. So you can see that people who have to juggle or speak two languages would do a lot more semantic processing. All right, the next slide, my final slide, is gray matter and bilingualism. Why? So hopefully you're on that slide now. So what I can see from the studies is it doesn't seem like we know exactly how and why bilingualism changes gray matter. And we kind of know that it does. And one of the main theory is that the experience of bilingualism involves learning and processing two languages which increases the cognitive demands on the brain. In other words, a mental effort creates more gray matter. So learning two languages creates more mental effort, like exercising a muscle that creates more muscle. Thank you. That's the end of my slides.
One of the benefits of being bilingual, as we've learned in this class, is more awareness of language. As stated from a website called Brain Connection, learning a second language focuses on grammar and sentence structure, making bilingual speakers more aware of language overall. Learning a foreign language makes bilingual speakers more effective communicators, editors, and writers. When a bilingual person hears a word in one language, research shows that the other language is activated at the same time. According to Viorica Marian, a professor of communication sciences and disorders at Northwestern University, and Anthony Shook in their article, The Cognitive Benefits of Being Bilingual, the brain's language system starts to guess what a word might be by activating a small library of words that match the signal, even before the word's finished. They also argue that this language co-activation is so automatic that listeners consider words in both languages. Depending on how similar the languages are, another benefit of being bilingual is literacy acquisition, which relates back to metacognition. According to an article found on waterford.org entitled Why Bilingual Students Have a Cognition Advantage for Learning to Read, because bilingual children are exposed to multiple languages at a young age, they're better equipped to pick up on word structure and develop phonological awareness skills. If they learn a word in one language, they're likely to learn it in another, particularly if the words are cognates. So bilingual children generally learn the alphabet and spelling words faster. They also will probably develop a more complex vocabulary in later grades.
Our next topic is bilinguals and switching between tasks. But first we need to identify some important basic information. An important term we need to identify is executive functioning, which is the ability to pay attention, organize, and plan. Next, as the National Institutes of Health mentions, there are 3 mental processes that take place. 1. Keeping a principle or rule, also known as working memory. 2. Inhibition, or refraining from using the rule. And 3. Shifting, or being able to change plans and use another principle. Some important facts and research are that as infants, those who are bilingual must focus their attention to different languages, and John Grundy, a postdoctoral research fellow with Professor Bialystok at York University, states that they grow up being able to adapt quickly to any changes and are able to disengage from one task and move to another. One belief is that the need to manage 2 languages gives them better executive control. There has been plenty of research about this topic, and most have had the same result. There was research done on students in the United States, however, because of many economic and cultural differences, the results were skewed. This may be because many students were immigrants and often had less resources. In a recent research project done by Raluca Barak and Ellen Bialystok at York University in Toronto, Canada, it was shown that bilinguals did better than monolinguals in switching between tasks. The testing group consisted of 104 6-year-olds who were bilingual and monolingual. The bilingual students consisted of English-French, English-Spanish, and English-Chinese. The children were asked to press a different button for each new category that appeared on the screen, whether it be animals or color. Consistently, the bilinguals outperformed monolinguals. Then, research done on students in a psychology course at Carnegie Mellon University showed the same results. In this experiment, the students were in a very controlled setting so that the factors were all similar. Students were asked to use both the index finger and middle finger on both hands to click a key depending on what the image was. In all cases, the bilingual students were able to respond quicker than monolinguals. However, both in this study and the previous, it was shown that in terms of vocabulary, monolinguals did better since they only had one language to focus on.
Hello class, my name is Elizabeth Unpinko, and today I will be discussing the next 2 slides about communicative sensitivity and the benefits of the brain for bilinguals in this sense. So when looking at the text, it discusses communicative sensitivity as someone who has increased sensitivity to the social nature and communicative functions of language. In a study that was done by Ben Zeeves, she saw that bilinguals seem to be more responsive to hints and clues given in an experimental situation. So I found this to be a huge benefit to the brain and developing kids, because this actually makes them understand people and language on a deeper level that helps them analyze different situations that you and I might not get on the first try. But because a lot of these students are put into a situation where they're constantly flipping back and forth between different languages, they have to pick up each clue that one person says, which means that they're a lot more attentive and listen really carefully to what you say. And that's a really, really great advantage that they have in the way that they actually think. Okay, the next topic that I will be discussing is actually seeing this in action. So there was a study done in 1975 by Genesi, Tucker, and Lambert, who compared children who were bilingual and monolingual by putting them together, and they all played a board game with one another. These kids ranged from the ages of 5 to 8, and the goal was for these students to explain a board game to 2 other students, and one of them was going to be blindfolded and the other wasn't. And when they were compared, they found that the bilingual students were more sensitive to the needs of the listeners and gave more information to the blindfolded listener than the sighted listener, which I found to be really interesting. But you could see that as kind of their own perspective on the social life of their own life, because they were once that blindfolded listener where they didn't necessarily understand everything that maybe their English teacher was explaining to them, and so they were helping the one who needed more attention. And I think that is a great way for them to actually be thinking. This is a really great way that the brain actually benefits, because it gives them a sense of understanding of who needs more help, and it almost creates this undefined empathy, which I think is really necessary, especially in early development of children.